So hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast. I'm editor Phil Hinton, and joining me on this edition this evening is assistant editor Steve Withers.
And since we let our first class passengers do pretty much whatever they want,
Games editor Mark Botwright.
He's losing his mind.
Movies editor Simon Crust.
I let him look at my boot at the Christmas party last year.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
See, Billy Idol gets it.
And audio reviewer Ed Selly.
Sir, one more outburst and I'll strangle you with my microphone wire.
So getting into things straight away, Sony and Panasonic, we reported this about 2 weeks ago on the podcast. They finally went into profit and their share prices went up. But also, on top of that, Panasonic have stopped making plasma TVs. And Sony have decided that they're going to spin off their TV division, Mark.
Absolutely. The financial results were just published at the back end of last week. And they came out with a kind of surprise announcement. We'll skim past this, but they're selling off the Vaio PC business to an outside investor. So they're completely washing their hands of that, concentrating on mobiles, tablets and smartphones. And as you say, they're going to make the TV business a wholly owned subsidiary of Sony because it doesn't fit with their new three key pillars, as it were, which are imaging, gaming and mobile. Basically, they've been hemorrhaging money for the last 3 or 4 years, Sony's TV division. And obviously to make the make the books look a bit better to the investors and to the board, they are making the Bravia TV business completely separate to the main operation, and the concentration going forwards will be on the high end of the market, 4K sets mostly, one would surmise from that. And I think it's something we didn't see it coming as a business decision, but we had noticed from CES and from IFA that they really kind of washing their hands of the low end of the market. So basically now if you're going to buy a Sony TV, it's going to be a pricey one. That's that really.
It seems like a strange decision. Obviously, we have seen this happen with other companies in the past. Toshiba, most of their stuff's now made by Vestel, and the main one was Philips, who sold their TV division off to TP Vision. They kept some of that company, but they've recently sold it all now to TP Vision. So the only thing that you'll see on the TVs is the Philips brand name. Philips has nothing to do with TVs. Obviously, the last TV company I remember who said we're going to concentrate on high margin, high end TVs was Pioneer, and
we know what happened there.
I think when you set up a subsidiary company like this, there's only one reason to do that, and that's to spin it off and sell it later. I would bet a farm that Sony will sell that division at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the only reason to do what they've just done.
Well, plus it gets it off the main books.
No, it doesn't get off the main. I mean, it's still on the balance sheet as a subsidiary company, but it just means it's much easier to divest yourself of it later. So I'll bet you they sell it. And I guess that's not a surprise. We were talking about it 2 weeks ago. We were saying we thought that at least one of the Japanese manufacturers would pull out of TV manufacture entirely. I mean, we were going more in the direction of Panasonic, I think, in that discussion. I'm surprised that Sony, I thought Sony might get a bit longer because they've made so much stock of the fact that they can deliver every aspect of 4K from capture to delivery.
And they turned it around quite a bit. I mean, 3 years ago they were losing, I think, £900 million in a year. Last year, the forecast, well, the end of this current financial year, they're forecast to lose 15 million. So they've turned it around quite a lot.
Yeah, true.
They just don't seem to have the patience to see it through. I don't know.
I think maybe it's also, they're betting an awful lot on 4K being a success. And I guess if it isn't a success, if it doesn't work out the way that they're hoping it will, and they don't dominate it the way that I think they're definitely positioning themselves to, then at least they can get out of the TV market quickly and painlessly. So
yeah, I guess that's the point. I mean, they did make a little bit of a thing in this statement, claiming that they were already had the lion's share of the Japanese 4K market, 75% of the 4K market, and in terms of revenue, they're the leader in the US. But then, that's the leader of what? It's not very many sales.
In a big gang of dwarves, isn't it? Really?
Absolutely.
I mean, 4K is still a niche of a niche. Effectively.
Just looking at the article very briefly, where does this leave the projectors? Do they count as something else, or are they part
projectors
of the
TV? Projectors come under Sony Professional.
Right.
So it's not Sony Consumer, it's Sony Professional that handles the projector side. Although they sell to consumers, it's usually through distributors. And like you say, Steve, we've been talking about 4K a hell of a lot over the last year or so on the podcast, but things are still very much up in the air and haven't really progressed in terms of content in the last 12 months. I mean, CES was a damp squib, nothing was announced there. BDA is still saying, yes, it's agreed in principle, but nobody's actually come out and said what the actual specs are going to be and how it's going to be delivered. It's likely going to be next year before we get that. So where are people going to get content from in the meantime? Can they stream it? Well, looking at
Depends on where you live, doesn't it?
Well, looking at what Netflix are doing, they seem to be doing that exclusively through an application which will be on 4K TVs. So how do you get that on the projectors? If that's the way you're going to go. So
someone raised a point on the forum today, and I was answering you, making a point back, and this is just my opinion, but the BDA, as you've pointed out, and we in previous conversations, is made up of a lot of different companies. So, like any committee, it takes a long time to come to a decision. They need to agree the standards, then they need to implement those standards into new hardware. So I'm guessing maybe for September, or more likely CES 2015, we'll get some announcements on sort of 4K Blu-ray hardware, hopefully, fingers crossed. But even that isn't a guarantee, because you still need studio support. If you want to look at how powerful the studios are in this whole thing, don't forget HD DVD against Blu-ray. It was Warner Brothers going Blu-ray exclusive that killed HD DVD off. So it's whether the studios are going to support 4K Blu-ray, and there's no guarantee, in my opinion, that they will. I think from their perspective, they'd much rather deliver it via download and streaming. That way there's no middleman, there's no physical medium, there's no production cost, there's no distribution. It's just, once you've got the infrastructure in place, it's all gravy as far as they're concerned, and they can control it from beginning to end. So I'm not convinced that the studios even want to bother with another disc format. So we might get the hardware, but I don't think there's any guarantee we're going to get any decent software to go with it. Apart from maybe, obviously, Sony. And because
I was just going to say, at least you get Sony and Columbia titles.
Apart from the obvious one, yeah. But yeah, generally the other ones, though, I'm not sure they're that concerned, to be honest.
So, I mean, just looking at the high street, it's impossible to make margins at the minute on TVs. It's been like that for the last, God knows how long. A long time now. I mean, obviously, we saw Pioneer and then Fujitsu pull out. We've seen other companies restructuring their TV divisions. It's not an area where you're going to make any money. We've had the digital switch over. The only other thing that's really going to push sales is possibly the World Cup, which is this year. But even then, there's no 4K delivery of the World Cup, so no need to upgrade your TV to 4K this year. So there doesn't seem to be much motive in a really saturated market, if you look at it. I mean, where are they going to make money? They're saying high-end TVs, but I think their best seller last year was the W6, which was a budget TV.
Yeah, just because it was the best seller doesn't mean they were making money off it, to be fair, does it? Most of the best-selling TVs probably aren't making money.
Yeah, exactly.
In that sector of the market.
42-inch W6 was the best-selling TV in the UK in the run up to Christmas, according to Sony, at least, when I saw them a couple of weeks ago.
But wasn't the big idea behind smart TVs that you would get other revenue streams like associated content? I mean, it seems a little bit odd for Sony to kind of section off their TV division when they have been touting things like PlayStation Now for it.
Yeah, and it's only about the only ones of the major TV manufacturers that have got the content to sell as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, but they don't seem to sell it very often.
No, they don't seem to make a great job of it.
There's not a lot of what's the word? Horizontal integration in that company, is there?
No.
You kind of think, well, the whole reason for buying a film studio was so you had film content to put out, and yet they don't seem to do that. They don't need to make it available. And you think that if there was one company in a position to force feed us 4K content, it's Sony. But
perfect.
They're not even releasing that media player in this country yet.
Perfect example of that is a Sony demonstration of a Sony 4K projector where they couldn't show the Sony movie because of rights issues.
That was amazing. Yeah.
Explain that one. Yeah.
I just thought that there is one good bit of news out of this, though, about the fact that they've sold off Veo, which means we're not going to see loads of those in the next Bond film, which should make a nice change. Because every time anyone in Skyfall accessed a computer of any sort, it was a Veo.
Unless that was part of the agreement with the company about it.
Well, the best thing was Casino Royale. They had Blu-ray recorders before Blu-ray was even launched. So there you go.
Actually, in all fairness to that, Phil, the Blu-ray recorders were available in Japan in 2004.
Oh, pedant. Right.
Let's I know because I saw one in a shop when I was there, living there.
Let's move on from declining TV sales and Sony spinning off their TV division. The BBC not happy and not quite as free as it should be, Mark.
A BBC Trust report. This is the BBC Trust is a governing body of the Beeb, made up of probably lots of posh people, I would have thought. a new value for money report that was issued last week, beginning of last week, and it looks at how the BBC spends its yearly budget, or budgets, should I say, and they're not happy on a couple of fronts. YouView in particular, and Sky. So we'll deal with YouView first. YouView is a company, a platform that's got various investors, including the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, BT, TalkTalk, Arqiva, a few others. And the BBC got involved with this part of the charter of the BBC is to make all their programming free to air and as widely available as possible to license fee payers. So YouView was seen, along with Freeview and FreeSat, as a good platform to do that. They heavily invested in it. And now they're unhappy because they see it as BT and TalkTalk, who have broadband and phone and TV package deals sold on the back of the YouView box. They basically think that the BBC basically think that they've hijacked the YouView platform, and it goes against their principles of making everything free to air, and as widely available as possible. So, yeah, they're not happy. So they're almost.
That is a fair point, isn't it, Mark?
I think it is a totally fair point. No, I'm totally with them. I think there's no doubt that BT and TalkTalk have totally hijacked YouView. The vast majority of boxes out there are sold on the back of packaged internet and broadband deals. So yeah, I'm with them on that for sure. And then they're also unhappy with the amount of money they have to pay both to FreeSat and Sky to get the BBC programmes listed on their EPG. So the BBC spends £9 million of the licence fee.
That's absolutely disgraceful.
Absolutely. If BBC withdraw their programming off Sky, then, how many subscribers
they can leave all the working class scum to go and stew in their football matches, but they'll take the good stuff off it.
What?
I'm taking that.
I started early.
I just really hate
Christ.
Sky. I hate them with every fibre of my being.
Well, of course, the other side of the argument is that, at least Sky and FreeSat are providing the platform, and they have to pay for the upkeep of that platform.
Yeah, but so do Virgin. Virgin don't charge. Virgin charge them nothing.
Yeah, but this is historically down to the fact that Virgin is let's not forget, an amalgamation of two of the most inept companies ever to try and sell anybody anything. It's a miracle that they do anything at all. I mean, let's face it, NTL and Telewest, the reason they don't charge the BBC most likely is because they probably forgot.
Okay, there is that, but even so, I still think it's outrageous.
And the other thing is that if the BBC's on the board for the YouView platform, then it's down to poor board management if they're now saying that BT is pushing their agendas. Obviously, if they're a partner in it, they've also got a board member on board, and he's not doing his job.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're going to be on that board very much longer. I don't know what that means for YouView for the future of YouView. Probably not a great deal, to be honest.
I'm a little ashamed with YouView, because I would definitely have bought a YouView box if it only had Wi-Fi built into it.
Yeah, that is.
Which is really annoying.
Subject, but yeah, it is silly. Because since they base so much of it on the IPTV side of things, then yeah, it's crazy that it doesn't have wireless inside. I'm sure the next one will, but yeah, it's still a good platform. But yeah, I can sympathise with the BBC's view on it, that it is hijacked by BT and TalkTalk.
The other problem with the BBC is that it's full of bureaucracy and red tape, and
getting
anything done. I mean, just look at their IT. Side of things. They had this IT thing where they moved a lot of the studios up to Manchester because it was going to cost them less money. They did the new broadcasting house. They had this IT structure. I forget how much money. I think it was about 100 million.
Yeah, on this IT system that they implemented. That what you're talking about. And it all went completely tits up.
Yeah, and then they scrapped it because because it was full of red tape. It's full of bureaucracy, and that's what happens when you get a corporation like that. So. Yeah.
Well, we know you don't like the BBC, Phil, and you're a massive apologist for Sky.
Well, no, Steve, what I'm doing is I'm giving the other side of the argument. Because otherwise it turns into you just bashing everybody and being racist.
No, I'm not bashing everybody, because I like BBC. I think they're excellent.
Have I ever said I don't like the BBC?
You have been quite critical of the BBC in the past.
I think it's fair to be entirely critical. Given the role that they have, and their continuous comments that they can't afford to do certain things, and that's why we get endless reruns of Only Fools and Horses, I don't think it is in any way problematic to point out the areas where they lavishly, enthusiastically, and continuously piss money up against the wall.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with that at all. I would also point out, okay, yes, the BBC is handing over money to Sky to get itself listed on things. That's terrible. At the same time, if I have a friend who is a small app, he's an app developer, and essentially there's huge swathes of app development where there's nothing you can do as a private individual, because a large swathe of developers working for the BBC who don't have to care about the profitability of their apps at all can completely and utterly destroy that section of the market. And I still have no idea why or how that's possibly included in their remit as the state broadcaster. So they are distorting the market in other areas. I think they can just about afford to suck it up in certain areas. Boo-hoo to them.
Yeah, well said, Red. Well, I mean, Steve, you didn't tell us about your new moonlighting on the Channel 4 gay campaign. Yeah, playing the part of the DJ. I thought you did your role really well there. If nobody's seen it,
I am totally opposed to the Sochi Olympics. I think Russia's laws are abhorrent and shouldn't be shouldn't be tolerated.
I was trying to make a light point there.
So that's why I did it, Phil. That's why I did it.
Yeah, I was trying to make a light point there. If anyone wants to see it, go to YouTube, put in the search engine "Gay Mountain," and.
Remember Googly's
Gay Man Mountain, I think, in my case.
It is the Channel 4 Sochi thing. It is absolutely brilliant. I also loved what Google did over the weekend there, where they made their point as well about the whole thing. So it is nice to see people standing up and saying what they need to say, although we can't say that in Russia, obviously.
I would like to express my disappointment to the Austrian Olympic team, though, that they didn't include the Winter Olympian, whose name alone is basically a statement on Russia's rules, because he's a bobsledder. No, he's called Manuel Pfister. And I think they should just have sent him anyway, just for the sheer unbridled joy of the fact he's called Manuel Pfister.
So anyway, moving on swiftly, let's go to Steve. LG OLED TV, it's at 1080 TV. You seem to be blown away with it because me and Mark are sick of hearing you talking about it.
In amongst all this doom and gloom, it is nice to remember that occasionally a TV can turn up that actually surprises you and makes you think, yeah, there is hope for the future. I know OLED's been a long time coming. I know that there's been issues with it, and I know most of the other manufacturers at the moment at least seem to be giving it a bit of a wide berth in terms of support. It really is down to LG at the moment in terms of pushing OLED as a technology for the mass market. But I've got to say, concerns about the curve aside, it is a lovely picture. It really is. I mean, I was watching the rugby on Saturday, and I just sat there and thought, that's really quite impressive. And I'm sure Mark will attest this. We get through a lot of TVs. It's difficult for a TV to blow us away these days because we've pretty much seen it all. Yeah. And I was blown away. My friend turned up on the day it arrived, and he was first of all slagging it off, saying, I don't like the see-through stand. And I've got to admit, I'm not a fan of the see-through stand. I see what they're trying to do is a kind of floating and air effect when the lights are out. But as my friend pointed out, you can see through the stand, obviously, and you can see the cables hanging down the back, which doesn't look that attractive. So I prefer the stand that we saw at CES, Phil. They had a third version with
it was lovely
additional stand, and that actually looked really, really sexy. The curve, I've kind of got used to it. It's not. It's as with the Samsung OLED. It's only a slight curve. It's largely pointless. Well, it's completely pointless to be honest. But you kind of get used to it, and it isn't really an issue. But the dynamic range on the TV, the black levels, I mean, you can't tell when the TV's on or off if it's a black screen. You have to basically keep checking you turned it off because you just don't know. It's just completely black. And the dynamic range is incredible. I've calibrated it. It's a really accurate picture. There's the level of detail. It's as you said, only 1080p. But it reminds you just how good things can look when they're done well. And even I put on a Blu-ray. I put on a DVD to watch something. I just actually watched State and Main because Philip Seymour Hoffman was in it, so like a little tribute to him. And even that looked really good because just had a really well presented image. So even though it was only standard def, you thought that looks quite impressive. Once you get onto high def and to Blu-ray, it really does start to look amazing. There's plenty of life left in that old dog yet, even though the manufacturers are trying to push us into a 4K world as fast as possible. But yeah, certainly, if they can make these damn things at any kind of realistic price and get them, and make enough of them, I, for one, I'm really, really looking forward to OLED becoming a more viable proposition for the mass market.
So nice, I bloody get to see one.
Well, let's not forget that Phil and I went to the launch of this particular product nearly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That's true.
Actually, it's nearly 3 years ago. So there you go. Obviously, there are some downsides. There's not everything is always positive. So what are the downsides with the LG?
There's only one downside, which is motion handling, which is basically like an LCD. That's its one real weakness. I say weakness. It's not like you're sitting there thinking that looks awful. But when you see camera pans and that sort of stuff on sport, particularly, it is more noticeable. And certainly that's the one area where a plasma still would be the superior technology in that sense. But otherwise, it's hard to fault. It really is hard to fault. I mean, we're looking forward to seeing what they do this year. In terms of an OLED screen. With their new operating, with WebOS built in and that kind of stuff. Because I mean, certainly from the point of view of the loving care that's gone into the TV. I mean, it's taken a long time to get here, but they really have thought long and hard about how to design it and build it, make it strong. Because unlike the Samsung, which has got that kind of the frame all around the image, the screen, and a much thicker screen, which they said was to make it more robust. The LG, is 5 millimeters thick, but very strong. I'm not completely sure, but I think it might even be some sort of carbon fiber weave on the back of it, because it looks like that's what it looks like anyway. But it's certainly very strong and incredibly thin, and it does look. I mean, stand aside, it looks very slick indeed.
And the price on this at the minute, Steve?
I think it's $4,999 now. It dropped dramatically before Christmas, so you can pick it up in Richer Sounds. And other retailers are available for I think it's $4,999, which okay, it's still a lot of money, but it's heading in the right direction at least.
I once paid that for a rear projection widescreen Pioneer TV.
Yeah, I paid $3,500 once for a shitty 32-inch widescreen for Philips CRT.
Any differences to the Samsung, Steve?
Well, the actual way that the way they deliver the OLED in terms of the technology behind it is different. So with Samsung, it's red, green, and blue with a bigger blue to allow for the fact that blue decays faster than the other two primary colors. With LG, they've gone for a different approach. They're using a white OLED and then they're using color filters. It would seem I can't, there's certainly they're not side by side, but I can't see any noticeable difference. I mean, I know some people reported that the LG is not as bright, but it's plenty bright as far as I can tell. That's not an issue at all. So. There's no apparent differences between the two technologies other than the way they're actually achieved. But it would appear that certainly from the perspective of LG, their approach is easier and cheaper, given that Samsung are kind of thrown in a towel a little bit for the moment as far as OLED goes. But I'm not the only person to get some new kit this week because, Phil, I believe you got the JVC X700.
Yeah, it's all right.
So moving on then.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had some new kit in for a review, so it's nice to have a new projector to play with. I haven't really done a lot of testing on it so far because what I've done is set it up, started watching a few clips, and then ended up sitting watching a few films on it. It is particularly good. I have an X90, which was the flagship model from 2011, 2012. So I did a quick side-by-side while I had the X90 set up. I put the X700 next to it, put the same feed in, and I've got to say I couldn't tell a great deal of difference between the two of them. So that gives you an idea of how the X700 has moved on, especially with the DLA chip, where they have improved the contrast performance, and it matches what was a £10,000 model 2 years ago. So in terms of picture quality, can't really fault it. There's a few things that I really need to test, like the dynamic iris system. Not really sure why they put it on. Well, I know why they put it on, because there's been a big clamour, especially in the US and US forums, where people have demanded that JVC put a dynamic iris onto the projector. Given the native contrast level and dynamic range of the JVCs, I don't really see a need for it. But we'll give it a full testing. I know you've tested it on the 500, Steve. What did you think?
I couldn't see the point for me. It made no perceivable difference in terms of improving the picture quality. I found the native contrast ratios to be superb already. The reason people have been putting dynamic irises on projectors is because their blacks are crap, and they're trying to make them better. At the end of the day, it is opening and closing very fast in order to make blacks appear blacker. That's going to have a detrimental effect on things like shadow detail. It has to, logically.
Yeah.
But give it a good go and see what you think.
Yeah, and like you say, the Sony projectors are absolutely brilliant, but to get them up to JVC level, they have to use the dynamic iris, and fair enough, the Sony dynamic iris is absolutely brilliant. You can't see it working. It doesn't affect the image, perceivably affect the image when you're watching content on it, and it does get it up to JVC levels. But like we said, it's getting it up to JVC levels. It has a dynamic contrast there. I haven't tested it with 3D yet. I haven't calibrated it yet. I haven't had a chance to do that. But out of the box, THX mode looks fine. You put it in a user mode. My only complaint is that they switch everything on in these other modes. So you've got to go through and switch everything off again. So the clear motion drive is a little bit of an improvement. I didn't see any artifacts. Using it in the low setting with video content, I watched a stand-up DVD actually, and it didn't really affect the image in terms of artifacting or anything like that, and it looked okay with video content. With film content, I could tell it was switched on straight away, instantly. So I switched it off. Yeah, and for the price point, well, a lot of people are going to compare this with the Sony VW500ES, and rightly so, because they're almost at the same price point. I think the JVC is maybe $1,000 cheaper.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Sony is a native 4K panel, but then again, we come back to what are you going to watch on the Sony in terms of content, native content? You're going to be upscaling, and the JVC has its eShift 3, which does work well this year. Like you said, it starts off in the film mode, and if you want to mess with the controls and do the enhance and dynamic contrast and all the rest of it, you can do that, or you can switch it off. The only other thing I noticed on this model, and I don't know if it's just the projector that I've been sent, and it is a retail unit. It's sent from their stock. It does whine. There is this whining noise when you have eShift switched on, which I found quite noticeable, and that could just be that I'm picking up on the frequency that the thing's whining at, and it only really happens when you're changing content or whatever on the projector. You can really notice it then. During a film, don't really notice it, but that was another thing that immediately stood out because I could hear it, but I don't know if that's just that unit or not.
I could hear it. The thing that you could hear it was when you change content, it would suddenly change pitch for a second or two. Not quite sure why it was doing that. Like it was turning itself. It seemed like it was turning itself on and off quite a lot.
Yeah.
Not quite sure why it was doing that either. But you certainly on the 500 I had, you couldn't hear it at all when you're watching a film or anything like that. It was just
yeah, and also
when the room was quiet.
Obviously, the X90 had the first version of eShift, and I can't hear it on that. I can't hear that whine at all. So that did stand out. But full review coming probably in the next week. Once I get a chance to sit down and calibrate it and measure it and play about with all the settings and see what the dynamic iris is doing and the other stuff that's in there as well. There's like a black enhancer, which I'll be interested to see what that's actually doing to the video signal. And that's it for hardware. We're going to move on, wake up Mr. Boatwright, and talk games next.
What?
So moving on to games. Big controversy. Flappy Bird. I'm assured that this is a game. Has been pulled for sales. Tell us about it, Mark.
Yes, small Vietnamese developer Dong Nguyen has removed it. Yeah, I knew that would bring a laugh. Come on, Steve. He's removed it from the Apple Store and Google Play, despite it making a reported or claimed $50,000 per day in ad revenue, and supposed to have been downloaded over 50 million times. He seems to have had a little bit of a Twitter meltdown, saying that he can't take this anymore, similar to Phil Fish, the Fez director who cancelled Fez 2. He said that it's not due to legal issues, but a lot of people have noted similarities to certain assets like the pipes from the Mario games, and it's similar to an earlier game, and objects look like they might be, or certain sprites possibly, I won't say reused, but taken inspiration from. It's a simple free to download game. You tap the bird to keep it in flight and try to avoid the pipes. It's one of those kind of, I don't know, addictive little moment killers that seems to last the entire commute. And it's one of those stories that comes up to kind of reinforces just how much money is possible from these, very, very small scale developments. And also that usually the developers don't have the correct tools to handle the pressures that come with it.
It seems strange that if it's bringing in that much money and he's pulled it, then it can only be a cease and desist order or somebody's threatening legal action. Why else would you pull it if it's making that much money?
Yeah, I suppose there's that. I mean, yeah, but there again,
you've seen some of the vitriol, people that ostensibly love the game pour out in the general direction of, well, anyone prepared to listen. What makes Flappy Bird a masterpiece is that it is testing the very limits of just how appalling in terms of difficulty and a general sort of gaming experience you can make something before people feel compelled to stop. And the answer from anyone that's played Flappy Bird is you can make it very terrible indeed. Even the videos that you can see of it on YouTube, if you haven't played them, it's too late. Obviously, they've now taken it down. Even the videos don't do justice to just how mind-blowingly frustrating it is as a game. It takes you right back to the 80s. The only thing I can think of which is close to that is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game with the underwater level that was completely impossible. It's the same basic premise where the controls are just responsive enough to make it notionally possible, but in reality it's completely and utterly impossible. And it brings people back like moths to a flame. All I would say is that if he has taken it down, it may simply be that there's something else in the wings ready to cause migraines across the world.
Reading on Twitter as well that devices with the game already on it are selling on eBay for up to $10,000.
Only to idiots.
Yeah. There's one born every minute, isn't there?
But no, as I say, I mean, for those of us those with perhaps an ill thought out nostalgia for 80s computer games, I mean, I played it briefly. Ironically, I deleted it a while back because I was getting ready to sell my phone on the classifieds. But I should have stuck with it in situ. I know. I made a foolish mistake. So. That was always obviously a problem. But no, it just took me right back to having 3 lives. If you died, you went straight back to the beginning of the level, and yeah, it's everything that my childhood was, just in a smaller and more compact form. And,
but does that make it a good game, or is it almost like the kind of small game version of like Stockholm Syndrome? You kind of it's got you, and you kind of look at it and think, well, there must be something vaguely empathetic there, and it isn't. It's just a ridiculously hard and simple game.
I don't know about you, Mark, but I have looked back on my childhood gaming history and I've wondered exactly where the pleasure-pain threshold actually was. I mean, some of the Amiga, especially really bad Amiga ports of coin-op games, had collision detection that made them as frustratingly difficult as Flappy Bird ever did, and yet I still played those to death. I mean, the original Ocean version of RoboCop was A, dreadful, and B, almost completely impossible. I still think I played it for 2 months.
Oh, you can see why people got worried about the first generation kind of raised on video games, because it was just die, reload. Are you enjoying this? No.
But I'm going to keep going until it kills me or I have a fit.
I put that down to why I don't game now. It put me off.
Games these days are made to be completed. They're made to allow you to get to the end and finish them. They really are. There are so few that kind of hark back to the old days of really kind of bashing you over the head and challenging your sanity.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there were certain Amiga games where they clearly never intended you to finish it because things just sort of petered out at the end. They'd obviously just stuck something in there which they envisaged was impossible to get past, and then just left it. So I have a certain, I don't know. Flappy Bird takes me back to a place where I once was, but I'm afraid I won't be spending out on an existing copy of it just because I'm just not that way out. I'm afraid, but no. I can understand why people have lost as much time as they have to.
I think you're just getting nostalgic for your youth, Ed.
Well, possibly.
And now that you're a father, maybe you realise.
Yeah, I apologise if Phil doesn't manage to get him out of the edit. But yeah, I don't know. His gaming experience will be radically different to mine. Although, obviously, once he's of an age where I can hopefully guarantee he won't destroy it, he will play on my Amiga. So he'll see things that most others.
Is that like some family heirloom?
No, I bought it a couple of years ago. eBay late at night.
Drunk.
The usual, yeah. So, but yeah, I don't regret it. I've bought more stupid things on eBay, more transient things. So, yeah.
Well, I've never heard of Flappy Bird until 10 minutes ago.
Well, this is because you're old.
I'm sure you've had plenty of flappy f***ing birds in your life.
I've had plenty of Flappy Birds, yeah, but oh, blimey, Phil, you inferring I'm straight?
Only
that makes a nice change.
No, you're bi.
Well, I think on some level we all are, aren't we?
Nope.
I once had this conversation with some mates of mine and was making that argument. And I said, look, I'm perfectly comfortable with my sexuality. And my friend said, yeah, we're f***ing not.
Isn't that one for the Valentine's Day thing?
Yeah, let's save that for later on. Only other thing we got mentioned games-wise is the Games podcast is due on Friday. Have you recorded it yet, Mark?
Nope. Hopefully tomorrow night will be the one.
Will it be a Valentine's Day special?
No, it will be
Man love and gamers getting it on.
No, you won't be invited, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well, no, thank for that.
No, we're going to be tackling, fingers crossed, Outlast. We've kind of challenged ourselves.
People have challenged your masculinity on last week's podcast.
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Well, you are a big bunch of girls' blouses, let's be honest about it. I mean, you're flying into the game, didums.
Yeah, and I swear I will have played it before tomorrow.
When you saw your trousers is the real question.
Well, that's always a risk you have to take.
And what else are you doing in the podcast?
I really don't know, I'm afraid.
But it's going to be all
this one.
Sounds like it's going to be a
professional was this one.
Yeah, so nice to see it's well planned and you have a.
Well, I'd have to
running
open
order.
see what we'd all written down, what we were going to do. I don't have it stored in my memory, do I?
Haven't you got Steve Hill's show notes?
Yeah, but I don't want to open up any extra little browsers for fear that it might crash this wonderful podcast that we're doing right now. God knows if the rubber band snaps, we're done for.
You're going to be talking about the Xbox One firmware update, aren't you, Mark?
Wow.
Yes, we are. Well done.
How did you know that, Mark?
I'm just reading the thing that Mark put up earlier himself.
See, I wrote this stuff.
Strider reboot coming this month, and Dungeon Keeper ratings fiddle. There you go. That's what they're talking about.
There is there is definitely something going on there. How that can be rated the way it is, it's a travesty.
Let's leave that to them.
I'm sure they'll get. I'm sure we'll get the whole story within 2 hours. Right, is that it? Games wise?
Yeah, unless you want to go on.
No.
Not really.
Okay, so I'll get back to Skyrim.
Okay, Steve, what's at the cinema?
Well, this week we've got RoboCop, the remake, obviously not the original, and Dallas Buyers Club. RoboCop, we'll start with RoboCop first. All I can say about RoboCop is it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, which is, I guess, faint praise. But it was competently made. It was mildly entertaining. It had a reasonable story, which didn't actually copy obviously the basic premise is the same, but the story is different from the Verhoeven original. The action, actually, to be honest, there wasn't as much action in it as I thought there would be. There were long sections when there was no fighting or anything like that, shooting going on, which surprised me. But what action there is fairly tame and bloodless. There's a whole sequence where there's a big shootout, basically in the dark, which I'm assuming was in order to maintain their PG-13 rating, minimize the amount of bloodletting and people getting hit and that sort of stuff. So it's fairly sanitized in that sense. The lead guy, I've never even heard of him, and he's pretty uninteresting and not very charismatic. Certainly nowhere near as good in the role as I think Peter Weller was in the original. But there's some interesting stuff in there, specifically dealing with him, him and his relationship with his wife and his son after he's turned into a cyborg, which I guess is an interesting aspect to look at. There's also some commentary on American foreign policy and the use of drones and that kind of thing, which I guess makes it slightly relevant to the current modern times. Having said that, it's completely missing the sort of biting satire, the humour, and obviously the staggering bloodletting that and violence that was in Verhoeven's original. What I can say definitely is that whilst we can sit here right now and talk about the original RoboCop 27 years after it was made and still all pretty much agree, I think that it's an absolute classic, I can guarantee you no one will be talking about the remake in 27 years' time. It was just okay. Well, ultimately, I just sat there and thought, I got a little bit bored in the middle section, to be honest. And then I thought, why did they bother? Do
you know
what was the point of this?
Do you know what encapsulates everything that's wrong with it? Milton Keynes' Cineworld has spotted a gap in the market. And Wednesday morning, it's got, and none of this is a lie, it's got Cine Babies, where you can just bring your child along to watch a film, and they keep the lights up a bit, and basically it doesn't matter if your child cries because there's a couple of hundred other in there, and they're likely to be crying too. And the film this Wednesday they're showing at Cine Babies is RoboCop. Now, can you even begin to imagine doing that with the Verhoeven one? So yeah,
I do hope someone somewhere mixed up the prints.
Yeah,
just for one screening.
Hang on, Ed, were you at Cine Babies? That's how you know
I don't do Cine Babies, no, Steve. I use it to produce the in-depth and hopefully well thought out reviews I produce for AV Forums when I'm not also trying to wipe dribble up at the same time and keep my son away from
your dribble or
well, it depends really how the night before went, but yes. Yeah, so
anyway, so that was RoboCop, which I guess I'd probably give it 6 or 7 out of 10. It was perfectly entertaining and competently made, but you kind of just think, what's the point at the end of the day? After that, I watched Dallas Buyers Club, which I thought was absolutely superb. Matthew McConaughey is almost unrecognizable in the film. He lost something like 50 pounds to play the role of this guy, Ron. A real true story of a guy called Ron Woodruff. He was kind of a hustler, electrician on the rodeo circuit, very promiscuous, drug taker, and he was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS and given 30 days to live. And playing somebody in that stage of disease, he does lose the way. He looks. I mean, you actually do kind of fear for the actor's health. He looks so ill at times and thin and emaciated. But his performance in general is superb. It's not just the physical aspects of it. It's also, he covers what is a very complex character. He starts off at the beginning as being homophobic and bigoted and pretty much a nasty bit of work, and then is diagnosed and then starts trying to get hold of just experimental drugs. The idea being that he initially for himself, it's for purely selfish reasons. He wants to get hold of these drugs because they might help his condition, and then gradually starts selling them to other people, other sufferers, for profit and for financial gain, but then ultimately ends up becoming a bit more of an activist trying to, because what the film does cover quite well is the history of that sort of mid to late 80s period when there were all these experimental drugs being developed like AZT and interferon, but they weren't obviously passed by the FDA for use in the US. So people were buying them abroad. They were buying them in Mexico, they were buying them from Japan, they were buying them from China, wherever they could get them. And technically they're of course illegal. But the argument was, well, if you're in the last stages of AIDS and you're going to die anyway, really, do you need to be protected from the drugs? If they don't work, they don't work, but they might help. And what he was doing was keeping records of what was working and what wasn't working and what kind of treatments were helping some of his customers. And he could have fed that information back to the doctors. It could have been really useful. So it was. I thought it was a fascinating film. He's brilliant in it. Jared Leto, who plays initially, he plays a transgender woman basically, and I've got to say, good-looking boy. Does it, one of those few examples where a guy's playing a transgender woman and doesn't look unattractive. Yeah, I think most people.
It has been a long time, hasn't it?
Quite androgynous. Living in the countryside on your own is not a good thing. But he's really, really good too. Again, he lost a lot of weight because obviously he's also got full-blown AIDS. But he has to spend the whole film basically in drag, and he's superb. Both him and McConaughey are up for Oscars. I've got a sneaking suspicion that they're both going to win Best Actor for McConaughey, Best Supporting Actor for Leto, and I think they thoroughly deserve it. To be honest, they're superb in the film. It was a great movie, really, really, and surprisingly enjoyable and fun given the subject matter. It's not really depressing. It's moving. And it makes you think, and it's got some really interesting historical facts in it. But what it's not is depressing, which is, when you think about a film about someone who's got full-blown AIDS, you immediately would think that's not going to be much of a laugh.
Philadelphia.
Sorry?
Philadelia.
I was just going to say Philadelphia.
Isn't that a Family Guy?
I just can't help. That song has been now going around in my head ever since you started the commentary on this film. You have AIDS.
Full blown AIDS.
Is it the good AIDS or the bad AIDS?
Anyway, so I think I get an 8 out of 10. It's a great film with some really, really standout performances in it from McConaughey and Leto. If you fancy going to the movies, definitely check it out.
It is based on a true story.
Absolutely, yeah.
But how much of that is retained in the movie, and how much is dramatized?
The majority of the film is pretty true. There are Leto's character is a composite, so he's a composite. His character is a composite of various people that knew and worked with Ron Woodroof in his business. Because the reason it's called Dallas Buyers Club is because they created these buyers clubs, and by being a member of the club, they weren't actually selling you the drugs. They were part of the membership. So it was a kind of way of circumventing certain aspects of the law. The Jennifer Garner's in it as a doctor, and again, she's a composite character who represents the medical industry, basically. But certainly the majority of the film is pretty accurate. Now, some people have said that Ron Woodroof wasn't as bigoted as he's portrayed in the film, in actual fact, and may even have been bisexual himself. But clearly, from the point of view of having a kind of a coherent narrative, they made that decision to have him as being one thing, and then making that, going on that journey effectively, and then totally changing his outlook and perspective by the end of the film, which is fair enough, I think, from a point of view of him. He also had a wife and a sister and a daughter who don't show up in the movie. Again, I think to keep a cleaner narrative from the point of view of the story they were telling. But on the whole, it actually is pretty accurate, and it was shot in 25 days on $3 million. And I've got to say, it was all shot handheld, and it gives the film a real vibrancy and immediacy, a rawness to it. You kind of feel like you're actually there, but still shot, I think, quite creatively. And it was shot on scope ratio, and the framing is really nice. It's not, it doesn't look like it's just all shaky handheld stuff. It's actually done really well. But it was a good film.
Excellent. Before we move on to Blu-rays released this week, we spoke about Babylon last week. Anybody catch it last night on Channel 4?
I watched it. Yes, I did.
Got it recorded.
Got it recorded as well.
I enjoyed it. That was really funny. Yeah,
I've got to say, really, really enjoyed it.
As a cop, you must have really dug some of the aspects because they had Foxtrot Oscar at one point in it.
They had a lot of stuff absolutely nailed on, and you could say that for any industry or any corporation, really, where you're looking at the top end and what they say and what they don't say, what they admit to and what they don't admit to, and so on. Really funny as well. Really, really funny.
Yeah, it was very good.
So very good, and it's been recommissioned for a series which is going to be later in the year, which is great.
Probably a quick plug here. The guy directing the first 3 episodes of the new series is John S. Baird, who directed Filth, and I interviewed him last week about Filth and a little bit about Babylon as well. So if you're interested, you can read that on the site right now. And Kaz's review of Filth is already up, and I believe the disc comes out this week. Came out today, in fact, because mine arrived, actually. Kaz's review's on the site, and the interview is also on the site.
Got to say, really good film. If you like the quirkiness of Irvine Welsh stuff, it translates really well to the screen.
Yeah, and James McAvoy gives the performance of his career in it. Absolutely staggering.
Yeah, top notch.
It's turned very, very dark towards the end, though, doesn't it?
It's a pitch black movie, but it is gallows humour all the way
well,
through.
It's an Irvine Welsh vehicle, so it's going to do that. You know what I mean? You know what to expect from him.
It makes you laugh, though, doesn't it? There's some really funny bits in it.
I mean, I was watching it on the plane, and I'm sure the people round about me on the plane thought I was nuts because I was laughing so loud.
The funniest thing on that plane was because it's shot in a scope ratio, and it was being shown on the plane in its correct aspect ratio on this little tiny screen. Just looking at like a postage stamp size.
The 2 movies I picked as well, Sunshine on Leith and Filth, and they were both scope ratio, and you're thinking, why? Moving on, other films released this week on Blu-ray. Captain Phillips, I know you're going to give this a big thumbs up, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got the Blu-ray myself. Got it from the States a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I watched it on the X500, funny enough, and it's still absolutely. Even though I'd seen it once before, it's still nail-biting and really well made. One of those films that apparently, having a research afterwards, I'm not sure how accurate it is. Apparently, a lot of the guys on the ship said that Captain Phillips was an idiot and he went too close to the Somali coastline and this sort of stuff. But the film itself is nail-biting and really, really well made, and great performances, particularly from Tom Hanks, who gives an absolutely fantastic performance of it.
I have it myself, yet to put it in the player.
Do you watch any films?
I'm not, no, Kaz's.
You just seem to get them through and put them to the side. You don't actually seem to watch them, Simon.
Well, I've got a huge mountain of unwatched DVDs and Blu-rays. It's unbelievable. You could build a house for it.
Yeah, it's actually taller than me, my pile at the minute. Mind you, I'm not very tall.
I've not said anything about that.
Yeah, I'm not that tall.
6 then.
Other discs released this week: Turbo, How I Live Now, and Enough Said. Anything to say about them?
I saw Enough Said on the same flight that you watched Filth on, and I really enjoyed that. That was the last, penultimate, I think, the last film with James Gandolfini in it before he died, with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I really enjoyed it. It's very funny. I thought it was a really, really good movie, really, really sweet and very funny. How I Live Now, Kaz's review's just gone up for that one as well. I saw that at the cinema in the summer. Didn't like that so much. It was kind of a tweeny movie, but set after sort of World War III. Not great. Turbo, I really enjoyed. I think you saw this, Mark, didn't you as well?
I see all these, yeah. Yeah, I thought it was great. Great romp.
Yeah. You've seen all of these, did you just say?
All the kids' movies that come out.
Oh, yeah.
That's what
Turbo is about a little snail who, by some sort of magic, ends up being incredibly fast and enters the Indy 500. It is great fun. I did enjoy it.
Right, so from the discs released this week, what should people go out and buy?
Well, I definitely recommend Captain Phillips. I think that, all-round, as a film, all-round film, it's a great movie worth seeing. Enough Said, it's certainly worth checking out. Maybe not buying on disc, checking out at some point, but it's funny and nice. Filth, as long as you're broad-minded.
Yeah, a quiet taste, I think.
And not easily offended. Is worth checking out too.
It's one of the most quotable movies I've seen recently.
We can't quote them on this day.
Unfortunately,
too much swearing in it.
Yeah, even with a bleep, it's not going to work on the podcast. Right, so you might have noticed our introductions this evening were from The Wedding Singer. Probably one of my favourite romantic comedies, just because it plays on the whole 80s thing. Really funny, really quite well put together. It is a bit of a, well, are you going to have Billy Idol on the plane? Are you going to sing your song over the tannoy and all the rest? It's a bit far-fetched, but good fun. So it is Valentine's Day, coming up on Friday, and I'll be spending the day with Frank.
Yep, I'll be binge-watching myself to death on House of Cards.
Did you say watching?
Yes.
Yes, he said watching.
Well, as opposed to what?
There's another binge activity. It's well known on the internet, Stephen.
There's quite a few binge activities, to be honest, Ed.
So, Season 2's House of Cards, it's out on Friday, Valentine's Day, the whole series too. So I'll certainly be binging over the weekend because I'm sad and lonely and don't have a girlfriend. I'm assuming it's the same for you, Steve, unless...
Absolutely not. I shall be binging and watching with a girlfriend.
So you get your foot pump sorted then? Right, so romantic comedies. I got to say, I'm not a big fan of these things. Like I say, Wedding Singer was a bit of a favourite of mine. There are a couple others that I quite like. Love Actually is set at Christmas, so it doesn't really... Does it count for Valentine's Day?
I think that's more as a Christmas film than a
It is, yeah. It's more of a Christmas film, isn't it? And I'm struggling to think of anything else that I would really...
Four Weddings? You know, like Four Weddings?
No, not really. No.
Bridget Jones?
No.
Notting Hill?
Arthur.
Basically,
No.
Richard Curtis has pretty much covered that market, hasn't he?
I was going to say Love Actually, I hated it when it came out. It's actually something that's grown on me over the years because it's always been on TV or whatever. Other Richard Curtis stuff? No. Got no time for it.
I like something that's a little bit different. You mentioned Wedding Singer, Punch Drunk Love.
It's not really a romantic comedy.
Well,
it's not remotely funny.
It's a different twist, isn't it? I mean, the first film that I took my first girlfriend to in the ABC cinema in Yule, which isn't even there anymore, was Predator.
Metropolis?
No, Predator. Metropolis.
And what did she think when you said we're going to see Predator?
Well, well.
I take it you're no longer with her.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. But what
a surprise.
Predator 2 was just something they couldn't get past.
Exactly. But a very, very strange quirk of coincidence. My now living partner, the first film that we went to see together in Australia was Predators. How weird is that?
Did you say?
Do you associate
did you
a
say
7-foot-tall mandible creature with love?
Did you say live in or living?
Live in.
Just wanted to clarify.
Would 500
wife
Days of Summer count?
Absolutely, that was going to be one of my choices. It's not actually a romantic comedy; it's kind of an anti-romantic comedy, but it's one of the few.
Hasn't it got that irritable bird in it? What's
Zoe Deschanel. I love Zoe Deschanel.
I know
Not
you-
words
you
said
know-
against her.
Whereas I would quite happily watch the test card in preference.
Irritable bird syndrome.
500 Days of Summer is excellent. Very, very.
My
good.
wife considers the original Terminator to be a love story.
Technically, it is. Yes, that's true.
I think I'd be happier putting it in the pursuit movie category, but you and her can obviously chew the fat over that. Obviously, I'd only let you near her under supervision, but
It's a love story that traverses time. Actually, well, in that case, Somewhere in Time is one of my favourite, not really romantic comedy, but certainly romantic films.
Yeah, we really are a romantic bunch here, aren't we? We're really
Well,
they're
mine's
tripping off the
probably
tongue here.
High Fidelity. I think High Fidelity is absolutely brilliant.
The Nick Hornby adaptation, is it?
Yes, it is, and it's
think
very, very funny and pretty much bang on the money as far as blokes go.
Gregory's Girl.
Well,
Yeah, that was all right.
it was all right for its time.
Yeah,
Just
Baby
come to me.
Cracker.
I don't know why.
And then you got Rita Sue and Bob too.
Yeah,
that's
that
a
was pretty
cracker of a film. It's about the most 80s film in the history of the universe. It's just fantastic.
Oh, it's the bit. The best bit is they have Black Lace in it. Doing a musical number.
Oh, yeah, doing.
We're having a gang bang. We're having a ball.
Can you get that on Blu-ray?
Probably not.
What about When Harry Met Sally? That's got to be worth a mention, isn't it?
Oh no.
Meg Ryan is
shut
Meg Ryan could be Zoe Deschanel's mother in terms of how much she influenced me.
Knocked Up, or even 40-year version.
To be honest,
40-year-old
40-year-old version I do quite like. Knocked Up occurred in that brief window where Seth Rogen wasn't something that caused me to throw things at the television. But I don't know if that's past now. And it's like, oh look, I do the same thing in all the films.
Yeah, I never found him funny. Mark Botwright, what's your suggestions?
Amelie, does that count? Groundhog Day.
Fine.
That's kind of romantic.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, Groundhog Day is brilliant.
And
Classics.
Groundhog Day was recently, 2nd of February, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
He takes a wild punt and says,
I'd have to throw in, since you mentioned The Wedding Singer, Phil, I always quite like 50 First Dates, which was their sort of follow-up film together, wasn't it?
Not to be confused with The 51st State, which isn't a love or a good film or much of a film. You can get Rita Sue and Bob 2 on DVD, no Blu-ray release. Sorry.
What about There's Something About Mary? That's really fun.
Yeah, I don't know that.
God, you're a miserable bunch of bastards, aren't you?
I have to say I hate the forced nature of Valentine's Day. I always have. I mean, I'm happily married. I love my wife very much. But the idea that we should make an effort on what will inevitably be some bleak, drizzly day earlier on in the year, just
Here. At least it's a Friday.
Sell cards, isn't it? Basically, in flowers. That's the only reason it exists.
Of course it is. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I was going to say, to remind people that are lonely that they are on their own, which probably jacks up the suicide rate for that day or something.
Actually, I think you're not far from the truth. I think it's New Year's Day followed by Valentine's Day in the official list of the best days to kill yourself.
Yeah, so thanks to all those smug bastard couples.
sorry, best days to kill yourself.
It's a good day to die hard.
My favourite Indian restaurant does an anti-Valentine's Day sort of meal where it's basically just they do big standard sort of banquet style thing, but it's ratcheting the garlic and naga chili quotient up to a solid 11 out of 10. So it keeps the dewy-eyed lot away, and I don't know if we'll make it this year, obviously, because we've got the baby, but that's traditionally what we've actually done on Valentine's Day last couple of years. So
Okay, so Hodges just said, no, I don't like that. So what's your choices?
Choice. I like Arthur. I like John Gielgud in Arthur. I really like that performance, and the whole. And Liza Minnelli was very good, and what's his name, the little fella.
Drunk.
Yeah, Dudley Moore was a good. I think it was a cracking movie.
What about Annie Hall?
Oh, that's quite good. Is that a rom-com? Strictly, I like.
Well, it's romance and it's funny.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess there are some.
I mean-
I went through a list of the top 100, and I literally got Arthur that I liked.
So despite going on about how fantastic he is in Dallas Buyers Club, I wouldn't watch any romantic comedy with Matthew McConaughey in it.
No.
Failure to launch is yeah. I'd like.
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Is he in that?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's one of his films. If he's leaning up against
something on the poster.
On the poster.
Yeah.
As opposed to Tom Cruise ones where he's always running away from something.
Jerry Maguire. That's I quite like Jerry Maguire.
That honestly is one of my least favourite films of all time. The only film I can at a heart instantly say is worse than that is Carry On Columbus. Jerry Maguire.
We're putting Jerry Maguire in the same boat metaphorically as Carry On Columbus.
Jerry Maguire is a phrase that rhymes with clucking hit. It's just awful on a level I can't easily rationalise. It's got people I hate doing things I hate in a hateful way, and for whatever reason, everyone else appears to have been struck over the head with a blunt object and doesn't recognise just how chronically shite that film is.
Ed,
you're all wrong.
You don't have to sit on the fence, Ed.
What about a bit of John Hughes classic then, like Pretty in Pink?
Well, I do have a thing for Molly Ringwald.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Get Out.
Before you were born.
And the Psychedelic Furs. They knew what they were doing.
Well, I suppose it doesn't have to be comedy. I mean, romance doesn't have to be funny. It can be harrowing, painful.
You've got to be careful. If you take it away from comedy, Steve's going to say Emmanuel.
I always preferred Emmanuel 2 myself. But
no, it'd be the Fast and the Furious one. Breakfast Club.
Ooh.
Is that
a romantic comedy though? That's more of a teen movie, isn't it? I don't think
there's romance
a
in it.
specific couple though, is there? There's romance in it, yeah. But
from there, it's a hop, skip, and a jump to Back to the Future with the love story between a boy and his mother.
Which is why Disney didn't want to make that film.
You go weird science.
What, a love between two boys and a robot?
Yeah. She wasn't a robot.
Fit to her. Yes, she was made for a Barbie doll.
That was the first video that went round our class in primary school with a bit of muff in it.
There's no muff in weird science.
You didn't pause right.
And that was followed up with what was the other one? Was it Lady in Red or something similar?
Woman in Red.
Woman in Red. That was the one. That was the other one that went round a week or two after.
Did you get taped back?
Mannequin with King Control.
2 Girls, 1 Cup.
A love story for our time.
I think the flip side of that one was the videos of people watching it. I found that more entertaining. Really, really entertaining.
More entertaining says that you've watched the original.
Before we go any further, can we just check who has actually watched 2 Girls, 1 Cup?
I've got to say I haven't seen it.
I have seen it, to my eternal shame. Not the entire film. I like to point out just
until the point that you finished.
Yeah, the first 2 minutes basically were good for me. After that, it was a bit pointless. Anyone else apart from me? Please say somebody else has seen it.
No.
Please. No.
I'm surprised
Ed.
I'm surprised Ed hasn't seen it. Ed, I think you've seen everything on the internet.
I know you must have seen it.
Which film's this? Sorry, what? 2 Girls, 1 Cup.
2 Girls, 1 Cup.
He directed it.
No. I've seen the video responses to it, and I am aware of the basic plot. So
it's scatological, basically. It's scatological.
I've watched 2.5 minutes of Swap AVI. And I probably could do with some counselling after that. So yeah, I don't need to see 2 Girls, 1 Cup. I've seen the nuclear weapon of that sort of thing.
Okay. So, sorry, what's Swap AVI?
I'm not telling you. I've given you all the information that you would ever need. Off you go.
Just don't do it on a working machine, whatever you do.
And I look forward to finding you hanging from a light fixture sometime in the next 48 hours, I suspect.
Well, I think that's enough crap. literally for this week.
Now that Ed's back, we're back to the usual half an hour of shit.
Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AV Forums for the latest reviews, news and videos. Plus, why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. So all I need to do is thank tonight's contributors. Steve Withers.
Once again, that would have been useful information before we got married.
Mark Potwright.
I've still got the spandex.
Simon Cross.
You think the time to make donuts guy is sexy.
Mark Hodgkinson.
He's gone.
And Ed Selly.
Please get out of my Van Halen t-shirt before you jinx the band and they break up.
I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening, and come back again next week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.